Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful creepy little human being, you. Welcome to my channel and welcome to today's morbid makeup video. I'm so happy we can meet like this. I'm so happy that somehow in all of this craziness, today you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or BRATTERSTEIN, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing the tragic murder of 27-year-old Lauren Giddings. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new morbid makeup video every single week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you specifically, you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us. One of us. One of us. And you can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter if you want. They're both BRATTERSTEIN, but no pressure. Okay, so now that I'm done begging you to join my cult, we can get into this video. Now, this is a video that I've wanted to cover for a while. I've known about for a long time. And maybe you've actually heard the story already as well, or you may just be familiar with the incredibly creepy videos that are associated with this case, like the oh so off-putting video that somebody took, like filming into Lauren's apartment the night that she died, or the video that's also pretty popular on the internet of Lauren's murderer learning on camera that her body had been found and his whole reaction being caught live by the media. Either way, I've never been able to quite get this case out of my head, so recently I was like, you know what I want to do? I want to learn every single thing about this case. So I went on the YouTube machine and I looked up Lauren Giddings, and I realized that there aren't very many full dedicated YouTube videos to this, which blew my mind because I thought there would be, just because so many of the videos have been around on the internet so long, right? So I looked, and the only video that I found that was like a nice full-fledged video was done by my friend Kimber, which if you're not already subscribed to her, you should be. I will link her video down below. I have not watched it yet because I wanted to finish my video before I watched her video so that I didn't get any ideas in my head and get influenced, because I'm a human being and that happens. So make sure to watch hers. I'll link it down below. But because there weren't that many videos on it, I decided, now that I've learned so many things from reading so many articles, that I wanted to bring it to you today. With that said, I'm going to be telling you the whole story today, and while I do, I'm going to be putting on a full face of makeup, hence the makeup in morbid makeup. Now, if that's not really your thing, that's cool. Thanks for hanging out this long. I hope you find a channel that covers this case in a way that you enjoy more. But if you're on the fence, you're not sure how you feel, maybe stick around. I think you could be surprised by how much you like me. Anyways, I think it's time that we stop talking about it and start being about it. Or, I guess more accurately, really start talking about it. So come, gather around and let me tell you the story of the tragic murder of 27-year-old Lauren Giddings. So to start our story, we're going to jump into our handy-dandy time machine and we're going to head to June 29th, 2011 in Macon, Georgia. Police received a call about a missing woman, and once they arrived at the apartment of this missing woman, they learned from people who knew her that she had not been seen in several days, though her personal items like her purse, her cell phone, or debit cards, things that you may need if you were going to go anywhere, were still within the unit. So investigators go in the unit, they start looking around, and that's when all of a sudden, through an open window, the officers are smacked in the face with a very familiar foul scent. The unforgettable scent of a decomposing body. So police leave the unit and follow their noses to the scent, and they're brought to the trash can area where there's two trash cans. This is the common area, trash receptacle area for the two-story apartment complex. And when they open the trash cans inside, they find a large plastic trash bag. And as soon as they went to lift it up, they realized that they were going to find something sinister in this bag. So they pull it out, they open it up, and they find the mutilated torso. Just the torso of a Caucasian female wearing only pink workout shorts. This was the torso of Lauren Giddings. Lauren Teresa Giddings was born April 18th, 1984 to parents Bill and Karen Giddings, and she was the eldest with two younger sisters, Caitlin and Sarah. Lauren was known as being a really good person. She was a good friend, a fun person to be around, a bright light, and a fun-loving woman with a happy smile and an open heart. She was a dog person, having her own pup named Butterbean. Are you kidding me? I fucking died. Butterbean? Stop it. She loved softball and running and reading and the color pink. A friend of hers described her as the color pink, saying, and I quote, "It was like her, unmissable, unapologetic in its simultaneous innocence and boldness, and certain to draw a smile and start a conversation. If there are two things in the world that sum her up, they are champagne and the color pink. They are sweet, life-affirming, and cause for celebration. She immersed herself in a profession that was known for black and pinstripes. She combined the rigor of pinstripes and the beauty of pink and pearls. Pink was her way of saying, bring it on to the world." She was really smart. She was the first person in her family to go to college, and she ended up graduating from the Mercer University Law School after moving from her home state of Maryland to Georgia, and she had hopes of being a public defender and was studying to pass her bar exam when she was killed at the young age of 27. So as I stated, shortly before Lauren's murder, she had just graduated from law school. So her and her friends, her fellow law students, decided that they wanted to have one big last hurrah before starting to study for the state bar exam, which is notoriously incredibly tedious. Like, I don't know if you guys know that I work for a law firm. That's like my primary job. And I've talked to all the attorneys and they're all like, that shit's no fucking joke. So they decided they were going to do this, and they scheduled this for June 24th, 2011. They were going to get together. They were going to go bar hopping. They were going to do a lot of drinking, all that jazz. That's exactly what they did. They got together. They hopped some bars before deciding that they wanted to head out to their secondary location. And they headed to the home of a friend of Lauren's, a girl named Ashley, to finish off the night. So the group got there, they partied a little bit, they spent a couple, more hours drinking, having a good time before the party sort of dispersed. Some people left, some people like crashed on the floor and on couches, you know how it goes. And Lauren was one of those people who decided to stay at Ashley's apartment, and Lauren actually stayed in the bedroom of Ashley's roommate, Joe, who was actually Lauren's ex-boyfriend also. So she spent the night in the room with her ex-boyfriend. He never said anything happened or anything, but I just thought, I don't know why it's important. Oh, it is important actually why we're discussing her spending the night there. It's not like me just trying to like spill her tea. This does come up later. Listen to these earrings. Now, what's sort of weird about this party, not the party, but Lauren at this party in general, is that she casually mentioned, all these people are drinking, partying, having a real casual, chill night, not really talking about serious things. I mean, they might be, doing the whole drunk, like, I really love you. You know what I'm trying to say. But they weren't really, like, what am I even fucking trying to say is what the real question is. That's what the real question is here. While at this party, Lauren casually mentioned something that is not a real casual topic. And that's that she mentioned to her friends that she believed she may have a stalker. Like, oh, between shots, by the way, I think I have a stalker. Here's the thing. I've been coming home, like, for a while now. And when I get home, it feels like someone's been in my apartment while I've been away. Like, I come in and nothing's missing, but things are moved around, not where I left them. And it happens fairly often. And I don't really know what to do about it. What? I was like, I don't even know what I'd say if my friend said that to me, but her friends didn't really take it seriously. Even though she said this had been happening for a while, it was said in such like a casual tone and without like her seeming scared or really worried. They just kind of were like, oh, that's fucking odd. And then just kind of moved on with their night without really addressing it further. But with what happens next, I'm sure they all wish they had taken it a little more seriously. Now, the following morning, people woke up after their night of partying and decided they needed to go about their day, go to work, go to start studying, go to nurse their hangovers, whatever it was that they felt like they needed to do that morning. And Lauren was one of those people who left that morning. Though nobody saw her leave except for her ex-boyfriend Joe, who she had spent the night with that night. So she leaves, tells him goodbye, is his story. And then nobody saw her or heard from her for 4 days after that. Now, Lauren not talking to her family for those 4 days or her friends for those 4 days wasn't that odd to them because of the fact that she had informed them that she was going to be indisposed because she was going to be studying for the state bar. So they were like, they didn't think it was odd at first, but after a couple of days, they realized like, okay, it is a little weird that like no one's heard from her literally in days. So Lauren's family, I think it was her sister, don't quote me, one of her family members actually contacts her friend Ashley, the one whose party she had been at, the last night that she was seen. They're like, hey, have you talked to her? Have you seen her? That's when Ashley's like, you know, fucking what? No, actually, I haven't either. So all of them decide that they're going to call over and over and try to get a hold of her. So they do that all day. They try to get a hold of her and have no success. So Ashley's like, you know what? Don't worry about this. No one worry about this. I'll just go over to her home and I'll see what's up. Because I believe most of her family was still in Maryland. So they didn't really have the option to just like go over and check. So Ashley's like, you know what? Don't worry about it. I'm going to head over. I'm going to go and see what's up with her. And she goes and heads to Lauren's apartment with her boyfriend. So Ashley and her boyfriend arrive at Lauren's apartment, and the first thing that they notice is that Lauren's car is there in her parking spot. So at first I'm sure they're like, oh, like that's good, she's here, like there's something positive from this. But then they kind of thought about it longer and they're like, wait a minute, her car's here, which means she should be here, but no one's answering the phone. So they started to get a bad feeling. So they walk up to her door, just feeling real creeped out, real belly bubble gut kind of thing, you know, like, oh my fucking God, what is going on? Why isn't she answering the phone? Not good feelings. So Ashley reaches out to open the door with a spare key that they knew that she had. And she looks over at her boyfriend and she's like, are you ready for what we might find behind this door? Which, man, I cannot even imagine that. But I know that sinking bad feeling that you can get sometimes and just like about to walk into a situation that you really have a bad feeling about. I can't even imagine what that would be like when your friend or someone you love is missing. So the two enter Lauren's apartment. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but Lauren's apartment was directly across the street from her old college campus. It doesn't really, actually it does actually matter. It does matter, the location. So she lives across the street from her old college campus. They enter the apartment and nothing seems amiss. That doesn't look to be the sign of a struggle. Nothing's out of place. Lauren's phone, her laptop, her keys are all right there in plain sight. And the only thing that really strikes them as odd, besides the fact that she's just not there, is that Lauren was actually moving. She wasn't going to be living in this apartment anymore. She was actually supposed to be moving, I believe, the next day. But her apartment didn't seem to be packed up in such a way that she would be leaving the next day. You know what I mean? It was like partially packed, but not like ready to go packed. And although that was weird, that was the only thing that was mildly setting off any alarm bells, besides, again, the fact that she wasn't there. So they decided, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're just going to hang around the area, wait a little bit, and see if she comes home. So they wait, and they wait, and they wait, and she never comes back. So that's when they realize, okay, it might be time for us to call somebody. So the authorities are called, and immediately they start investigating Lauren's disappearance because, you know, this is like a college area right next to a big school, and they couldn't have a missing girl in their town. Like, they can't close the beaches in Amity for one frickin' shark is basically what I'm saying. I'm reading Jaws right now, and it's fresh in my brain, though it doesn't apply to this whatsoever. It just reminded me of that, but anyway. They start canvassing the area, speaking to everybody who lived around her, all the neighbors, all her friends, everybody who's there. And no one has seen her. No one has heard anything. But they do speak to one of Lauren's neighbors who has an interesting theory. This was Lauren's neighbor, a man named Stephen McDaniel. And he told police a theory that he had that I believe a lot of people were already thinking, but nobody had yet stated it because everybody wanted to hope for the best. And he just stated that perhaps Lauren had gone off to go on one of her runs because she was an avid runner and that somebody had seen her and had snatched her off the street. I literally cannot even imagine how challenging this time when she was missing must have been for her family, dude, especially since so many of them weren't even in the state. They were in Maryland. I do know that her dad ended up driving down to Georgia to be there during the investigation, during the searches, etc, etc. But it was like a 10-hour drive, so I can't even imagine what that must have been like, making that drive, just knowing that something bad's happening and not being able to do anything about it. It sounds terrible. And also during this time, there was a $12,000 reward offered for any information, but no tips were coming in that were useful. One thing in this case that was sort of like a bright light, which I guess is just like my way of breaking up the horrible when I can. And sometimes we just need that, man, because these cases are so sad. But one thing that was positive and that I'm happy happened for Lauren's family is that right before she disappeared, she had actually been home visiting her family for her sister's wedding. So they all got to see her like right before she went missing, and they got to like experience her and have photos with her, and she got to be part of that very important family, you know, loving environment. And I think that that's a very fortunate and unique thing that her family got to experience before she was tragically killed. So the first people that police were particularly interested in speaking to were Lauren's current boyfriend, a man named David. This is actually who she was going to be moving in with when she left her apartment. And also her ex-boyfriend Joe, who was presumably the last person to see her alive, the one that she spent the night with that night. Police speak to David first, and David is 20 years older than Lauren, and he's actually an attorney at a firm where Lauren had done an internship previously, and that's how the two met and fell in love and started dating. Now, he tells police that he hasn't spoken to Lauren in several days because he was away on a golfing trip, and that it wasn't uncommon for him and Lauren to go several days without talking to each other if he was away and they were busy and things were going on, which to me, that's odd. I understand not being super chatty with your partner, and like, for example, me and my husband, if we are ever away from each other, which, let's be real, isn't very often because we are best friends and never ever want to be apart from each other. That's just how we are. But even if we are apart from each other, yes, we do allow each other, that sounds weird, but we respect each other's space enough to be like, okay, you go do what you want to do all day. I'm going to go do what I'm going to do all day. Let's have fun separate with our friends and not be on our phones the whole time. But we are still checking in with one another, sending like a morning text and evening text saying, you know, like, hi, how are you? I just want you to know that I love you and I am alive. But I am judging this from my personal experience and my personal relationship, and everyone's relationship is different. And apparently David and Lauren did have a good relationship. I mean, they were moving in with each other. He loved her, and he was even planning on proposing to her. So police move on to Joe, and Joe just doesn't look the best to police right off the bat because, one, he is her ex-boyfriend, and apparently Lauren had actually dumped Joe to be with David, so there could be a bit of a scorned lover situation there. And on top of that, Joe said that he saw Lauren leave that morning from the party, but no one else saw that. So he's just not looking so great. So they ask him, like, okay, what happened that morning? What happened that night? When you last saw her, what was the situation? Blah, 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 blah. And that's when he tells police that that morning she had left his and Ashley's apartment and headed off to go take a swim. And police looked into this, and they found that this actually was true. They did find records that she had gone for a swim. They looked further into Lauren's Saturday, and they found that she had definitely left Joe's apartment, so that wasn't the last place she had been. And they found evidence that she had been alive through the afternoon, through receipts and things like that. And they also found evidence that she was still alive in the evening of Saturday because they found an email that she had actually sent to her boyfriend David while he was away on his golfing trip. Now, the contents of that email were very, very noteworthy to police. In her email, Lauren told her boyfriend that maybe she was being dramatic, maybe she was making a big deal out of nothing, but that she was scared because she felt like somebody had broken into her apartment and had been in her apartment while she had been out the night before. She continued through the email saying that maybe she was making a big deal out of it. She just wanted to try to put it out of her head. She was about to be moving anyway, etc., 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 and just tried to forget that it had happened. So in the meantime, police are searching Lauren's apartment. That's how they found the email, her laptop, etc., etc. But they don't really find much else, and they don't have a lot to go on, and that's until they're hit with that smell. So they follow the smell, and they end up at the apartment's common area trash cans. They identify the trash can that has the smell. They pull out the bag and they find the torso of a Caucasian female. No arms, no legs, no head, just the torso. They do what they can to try to locate the rest of the remains. They look in other trash cans in surrounding areas, but the problem is that this day was trash day, and all of these trash cans had already been emptied. So the trash can containing Lauren's remains was set to be emptied that day. So if her friends hadn't gone that day and reported her missing that day, they may have never found her. Can you imagine how scary that is? Like, think of that as a thought. If they had never found her, how would they even know something had ever happened? So initially, police were going to try to keep the discovery of this torso a secret because, one, they didn't even have an ID on it. Did they think it was Lauren? Of course they did. But they didn't know for sure, so they didn't want to just release it before they tested and found out for sure that it was her. And on top of that, they didn't want the news to get out because this was a college town and they didn't want to put people into a panic when the torso of a woman is found across the street from such a big college. Unfortunately, though, this information was leaked. It got grabbed, got snatched up by the media. It spread like wildfire, and some of Lauren's extended family even saw it before her immediate family did. And they reached out to her family and they asked them, like, how are you doing? And that's how they learned that their daughter's body, their daughter's torso, had been found. So Lauren's father actually headed over to the police station after this, like, intent on seeing her and identifying her body himself. But when he got there, investigators told him, like, listen, I understand, but bro, you do not want to see her like this. And they were able to convince him not to view her in that state. Thankfully, because can you even imagine? You're not going to recover from seeing your child like that. So I'm glad that he didn't see her. But through blood tests, they were able to confirm that the torso did belong to Lauren Giddings. So once the media learned that the body had been confirmed to be that of Lauren Giddings, they headed over to the apartment complex in hordes, just flocks of seagulls coming down on this apartment complex. Because, I mean, the body of a young blonde white woman being found in a trash can across the street from a college was big news. So they head over and they start questioning anyone they can see, anyone who will give them an interview, any friends, any neighbors, anyone who knew anything. And of those people interviewed was, again, Lauren's neighbor, Stephen McDaniel. This is the same guy, if you remember, who said that perhaps she had been snatched up while on a run. Well, the news folk, the reporter, talked to Stephen and he told them, you know, like, he knew her lightly. He knew her a little bit. He knew her lightly. He said he knew her, that the two had gone to the same college, though they weren't really in the same friend group, and that she was just, like, the nicest person that you could ever meet, that she was a big people person, that he couldn't think of a single soul who would want to hurt her, and that just, like, what happened to her was absolutely crazy. He also admitted that the day that her friends came over to the apartment to try to find her, he had actually met up with them, like, saw them and was like, oh, what's going on? And had actually gone into Lauren's apartment with them to try to kind of find out what was going on, and that none of them could figure out anything. Because this interview was being recorded, like, video recorded, like we're doing right here, right now, they were able to actually capture his very first reaction to the news that Lauren's body had been found in the trash area of their apartment as well. The reporter asks Stephen, quote, "What about in the parking lot area? I know they've been doing a lot of, I think that's where they've recovered the body, whatever they recovered there." And Stephen just stops. He, like, cuts her off while she's talking, and he's just like, body? And then the reporter asks him twice if he had seen anything over there, and he just freaks out. He freezes and starts, like, swaying, and they tell him, like, we don't know if it's her. We're just asking people what they've seen since a body has been found. And he still doesn't respond, and she's like, "Are you okay, sir?" And he just says that he thinks he needs to sit down, walks off camera, and just, like, sits down on the ground, and the camera keeps filming him for a second. Stephen ended up being unresponsive for quite some time. And it was to the point that this was even noted by investigators. Like, they definitely saw him, they definitely saw his reaction, and they definitely thought it was odd. One officer even had to do a sternal rub on Stephen, in order to break him from his trance, and I had to Google what this was because I hadn't heard of it, and apparently they just take their knuckles and like jam it into your chest to kind of hurt you essentially and break you out of a trance. After this, Stephen does come back on camera and they talk to him for a good while, and the whole time he's like crying and freaking out. And it like goes in and out. You can find this on the internet, by the way. It goes in and out where all of a sudden he's not crying and then he is crying and shaking and being really dramatic and then being kind of calm. And they ask him like, what are you thinking? What's going through your head right now? And he just says like, why would anyone do this? And continues to cry. Now, who was Stephen McDaniel? Stephen Mark McDaniel was born on September 20th, 1985 to parents Glenda and Mark. He grew up in a loving family. His parents were seemingly great. They even ended up adopting several of his nieces and nephews since one of his sisters had an ongoing drug problem. So they were clearly loving and willing to help. Stephen was very involved in the church when he was younger, doing church plays and all that jazz. And during the time, he was known as being a loving and curious kid. Stephen graduated from high school with a presidential scholarship to attend Mercer University, and in college he was known as being very bright, but maybe a little unmotivated. His teachers trying to push him to his full potential, but he wouldn't really put in that effort. Before moving into that apartment where he'd eventually meet Lauren, he was put into a dorm on campus where he had 2 different roommates. His first roommate was a guy named Matthew, and his second roommate was a guy named, wait for it, Thaddeus Money. Jesus Christ. You know that this guy was just set up for success with a name like that. Thaddeus Money. Jesus Christ. Anyways, both of these guys who were his roommate at different times didn't remember Stephen as really having very many friends. He was kind of a loner. He would lock himself in the room and mostly just play on his PlayStation and post on online forums. And he would read a lot of books, and he actually tried to write books himself as well. His 2 former roommates also described him as being, quote, grossly unhygienic, which damn, that's very harsh, and socially awkward. They mostly described him as sort of like a weird dick. They said that he was a little bit rude, that he was the type of guy who was very, very consumed with the idea of power, that he wanted to be a powerful person, and that he was the type who would say that he was smarter than everyone he knew, and that he was the type who would get really excited and loved talking about really morbid things like how to commit the perfect murder. They didn't really think he was dangerous though, just socially inept. He was just described as a weird guy, a little quirky, a long-haired kid with sideburns who loved zombies and Star Wars and the Lord of the Rings movies and samurai movies. Him and his dad were big on samurai movies, which generally involves a good amount of body parts being chopped off. And he wore like billabong shirts and jean shorts. Not jean shorts, jorts. Because they were like jean shorts. He had been Lauren's neighbor for 3 years and had developed a pretty big crush on her and had subsequently started stalking her, following her, taking photos of her, taking videos of her, and letting himself into her apartment without her knowledge. And he had even asked her out a couple of times, but each time she turned him down because like she, A, probably wasn't interested, and B, had a boyfriend. And she told her friends of him and his advances that it wasn't like scary or anything. He was just a bit awkward. So police end up asking Stephen to come in for questioning because they thought that the way he behaved in his interview with the reporters was weird enough to merit a conversation. So he comes in and he doesn't make himself look much better, because before, during his interview with reporters, he was real chatty. He had a lot to say. He was very open to discussion. But now, while he was in with police, that was not the case. He was very quiet. He was very controlled. He was very stoic. He sat incredibly still, and he answered every question with a simple yes or no, or most commonly with an I don't know. Almost every question was I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. Kid. He's kicking, man. He's kicking my organs. During this interrogation, interview, whatever you want to call it, police also noted that Stephen had fresh scratch marks on his face and on his stomach, which he said he had done to himself. So police keep pressing him, and eventually they do get him to open up a little bit. They get him to say that, like, He's been very busy recently because, you know, he just passed law school. He's been studying for the bar exam. He's been so consumed with school and stuff that he hasn't really had a chance to socialize. And because of that, he hasn't had a girlfriend. And because of that, he is a virgin, which is like such a weird thing to even come up in conversation. Like, cool story, bro. Thanks for that information. In that same conversation, they convince him to allow them to come to his apartment and search the apartment, which I don't know why he would just offer that up, but he does. And when they're in his apartment, they're looking around, and what do they find? A bunch of condoms, which was odd for investigators considering that he had just said he was a virgin. So now that fact that I told you that he's a virgin makes a little more sense, because I'm sure you were like, thanks for that. How does that apply? This is how that applies. So they look at him and they're like, listen, why would a virgin who doesn't drive need so many condoms? And he's like, listen, it's crazy. Those aren't mine. Those are actually condoms that I have stolen from various homes that I've broken into in this apartment complex. Now, why would Stephen just offer up this information to police? For the life of me, guys, I really just don't know. It's the weirdest thing to me. Like, what's wrong with the good old-fashioned, they're not mine, I'm just watching them, holding them for a friend kind of lie? I don't know why. My brain melts. Like, why would you tell them that? I just don't understand. But he did. And because he did, they arrested him on burglary, because you can't break into people's house and steal their shit. That's illegal, Stephen. So they arrest him. And while he's in custody, they do a more thorough search of his apartment, and they find some very interesting things. Inside his apartment, they find the packaging to a hacksaw, but no hacksaw. They find a bloody pair of Lauren's underwear. They find a video camera. They find a digital camera. They also find a stockpile of knives and swords. And they find 2 keys. And so they take these keys. Now we should figure out what these open. And that's when police find that these keys, one of them is the freaking master key to the whole goddamn apartment complex, so he can get into any unit he wants to. And the other one is a key specifically for Lauren Giddings' apartment. So at this point, they're also searching Lauren's apartment more extensively, because now it's gone from a missing persons case to a potential murder case in their minds. So they're searching her apartment and they find nothing. No hair, no blood, no fibers, no DNA, nothing anywhere except the bathroom. When investigators luminol tested that bathroom, the bathtub lit up like crazy. It was very clear that the dismemberment of Lauren's body had taken place in her very own bathtub of her own apartment. But the killer had cleaned up so well that there was nothing, no DNA, no hair, nothing to show that anything had even happened there except for that glowing, bright bathtub. So at this point, police want to search the common areas of this apartment complex, like the whole apartment complex, more thoroughly, because they now knew that Lauren had been murdered in the apartment at this complex, that her body had been disposed of in the trash cans at this apartment complex, and that this fucking crazy person, and I mean crazy as in like a few extra nuts on his banana split, you know what I mean, had a freaking skeleton key that could let him in anywhere he wanted to go. So they search and they search. And I saw 2 different reportings on where they found it. One said that the evidence was found in a laundry room, and one said the evidence was found in a maintenance room. Either way, what was found was a hacksaw. And when the hacksaw was tested, it still had Lauren's blood and bits of her flesh on the blade. Okay, so Stephen, he's already arrested for those burglaries, but while in custody on August 4th, 2011, he was officially charged with first-degree murder, as I'm sure you can imagine. And while in custody, investigators start going through that laptop and that digital camera that they had taken from Stephen's apartment. This is where they found all types of intense evidence. The first thing they found that was messed up, to say the least, was on his digital camera. They found a video on his digital camera that was presumably taken the night that Lauren was killed. And Lauren lived on the second floor, so the way that they believe this happened is that he attached his camera to like a stick, and then he held it up, and he scanned Lauren's apartment. Her window, her blinds were like cracked, and you could just see little slivers of her apartment between the blinds of him just recording inside her apartment without her knowing on the night that she was killed. Isn't that fucking gross? Then, on his laptop, they found even more disturbing things, and that was that they were able to determine that Stephen had been looking up violent rape and torture porn, and at the same time that he was watching this, he was also looking at all the photos of Lauren from her various social media accounts that she had, and that he had been looking at a bunch of photos of Lauren from a flash drive that he had stolen from her apartment. So he's watching all this rape and torture porn while also looking at photos of Lauren. I think we can guess what he was doing there. And if this doesn't illustrate what a piece of shit this guy is, in searching his laptop, they also found a ton of unrelated child pornography. So once Stephen and his defense team were presented with the evidence against him, he decided that he was going to take a plea deal because he was fucked. And basically what the deal came down to is that he would plead guilty, he would tell police everything that happened, and in exchange, the death penalty and the child pornography charges would be taken off the table. Now, I'm going to tell you what Stephen said happened that night. Stephen said that he put on gloves and a mask and then entered Lauren's apartment at about 4:30 in the morning that Sunday morning / Saturday night, however you want to look at it. He entered her apartment, he entered her room, and he just stood over her as she slept. As he went to creep closer towards her, a floorboard in her apartment creaked, and this woke Lauren up. So she woke up to this monster in her apartment, to a masked man at 4:30 in the morning, standing over her in her apartment. Fuck. Stephen said that Lauren calmly sat up in her bed and told him to get the fuck out of her apartment, but that he didn't do that. He instead jumped on her and started to strangle her in her bed. And in the scuffle between the two of them, they ended up falling out of the bed and onto the floor, and he ended up getting her legs like under her bed to stop her from kicking him or fighting him off. And he said that somehow during the struggle, she ended up ripping his mask off, seeing that it was him, and saying, and I quote, "Stephen, please stop." But he didn't stop. He continued to strangle her until he was sure that she was dead. He said possibly up to 15 minutes. He then drug her to her own bathroom and put her in her bathtub, where he left her pretty much the entire day Sunday while he went home to figure out what he was going to do next. And of those things he was going to do next was go to the store and buy a hacksaw. He returned to her apartment at about midnight. He went into the bathroom and he dismembered her body in her own bathtub. Stephen then took her limbs and her head, wrapped them in several black trash bags, and then transported them across the street to the college to dispose of them. He then took her torso and he disposed of that in the trash cans on the apartment complex before cleaning himself up. He took his mask, his gloves, I believe his shirt as well. He cut them into pieces. He flushed them down the toilet. And then he just kind of hung out in his apartment and waited until somebody showed up to find out where she was. And then he joined in on the searches alongside them. Stephen said of his reasoning behind this murder, and I quote, "It's difficult for me to explain why I killed Lauren and attempted to conceal my deed the way I did. The difficulty in explaining it lies within my own ability to understand it myself. I know that it was very wrong. I'm not delusional or without any morals or decency, yet I acknowledge that something in my makeup, my psychology, my neuropathy, my own particular pathology perhaps, must explain it, but it's beyond my reach." Not immoral or indecent. Yet he cut her body into pieces and threw her into the trash and made it so her family to this day has never been able to recover her head or her limbs. So Stephen, good old Stephen, he tried to say that this crime wasn't premeditated, that he wasn't planning to kill her when he broke into her apartment in the middle of the night, that this is just kind of what happened because he panicked. But there was evidence presented at trial that would suggest otherwise, that would suggest that this was very premeditated. And one of those things that was presented at trial was a post that he had made on one of those online forums. Remember I told you how he liked to go on online forums and post lots of stuff. That's what his old roommates noted about him. Well, they found a post that he had allegedly done where he talked about a casual interaction with an acquaintance, encounter with an attractive acquaintance that, in my opinion, did not go positively. But in his forum, he didn't seem to think that it was all that bad. This post said, and I quote, "Graduate from law school, party hard by drinking alone in front of my computer. See my sexy neighbor/classmate come home late. She has talked to me occasionally in the past. He wanted, quote, a certain piece of my anatomy for 3 years. Invite her up for a nightcap. Make her a special drink called a Mickey Finn. She's out cold. I finally lose my V card. Oh no, she OD'd and died. I barbecue her legs and arms to celebrate losing my V card. Not into organ meat, but throw her torso out. Lose it on TV while the cops are discovering her remains. You mad virgins." An investigator, the investigator who was reading that passage, which was just expertly written, might I add, pointed out to the court that a Mickey Finn is a drink, like a rupee. Like you drink it and it makes the girl unconscious. And once the officer was done reading this passage out loud, you look over at Stephen and he's just sitting there with his eyes closed because he knows his ship is sank. He's fucked. He's a dumbass loser. The end. Thanks for watching this video. Just kidding, I have more to say. And so does Jack, apparently. In the end, in 2014, Stephen McDaniel was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole till the year 2041. Lauren's sister, Caitlin, said that the fact that the killer ended up being Stephen McDaniel was both shocking and really saddening to her, and she expanded on this thought, and I quote, "It seemed like she might have been one of the people who was actually nice to him and gave him some attention even though he might have been a loner. There's no story here about telling your kids to lock their car when they get in or don't go to this side of town. You know, there's no, she shouldn't have done this and it wouldn't have happened, because you should always be nice to people. You should always be nice to your neighbors. Just because someone looks different doesn't mean they are." But in this case, he just was. Lauren Giddings, which was Lauren's mother, said of Stephen McDaniel at his trial, and I quote, "Stephen McDaniel is a psychopath who cowardly allowed darkness and evil to consume him. He should never be permitted to prowl the streets of this world again." So, in 2018, Stephen McDaniel actually did try to get a new trial. He tried to say that his counsel was ineffective and that his rights were violated. He also tried to submit a motion to have his judge, the judge who heard his trial, disqualified. But that judge is the one who heard this motion, and he was like, fuck you, I'm not getting disqualified. And he also wasn't granted a new trial. But during Stephen's hearing, because a trial and a hearing are different, he had a hearing to determine if he was going to get a trial, right? And during this hearing where he was talking about his former attorney being ineffective, he actually took his former attorney and he put him on the stand and he questioned him and he grilled him for like over an hour. And something he said was very interesting to me, and I want to tell you guys about it. I think it shed some light into who Stephen was. And his former attorney said to him, of him, and I quote, "Until the last couple of weeks of your case, I was strongly in your corner, believing you were innocent. But this computer evidence came in from the GDI, the fact that you were peeping in this apartment, the graphic, specific, detailed confession that you made, which we were shocked about, in which you went into horrific detail about how you killed Lauren Giddings, how you went about decapitating her, carving up her body, how you even sat down and cut off every finger and thumb and appendage on her hands and threw them all in the toilet and flushed it at one time. And then combine that with the searches on the internet, the fact that you had done searches about having sex with dead people, things of that nature. All of that combined to a heavy, heavy evidentiary problem in your case. On top of that, you possess the most horrific child pornographic photos I've ever seen, and I've been practicing law for 33 years. And we worked out a deal with the United States Attorney's Office where if you entered a plea in front of a judge, that they were not going to prosecute you on the child pornography. He then continued by saying, quote, "You started off with the death penalty and ended with life in prison with the possibility of parole. You could get out one day, Stephen, and you viciously murdered a woman and dismembered her, and you could still be paroled. So I don't see how that's an ineffective assistance." And I feel like that statement, that quote, really illustrates what a piece of shit person this guy was. What the fuck? He kills her, he dismembers her, he cuts off each of her fingers and flushes them out down the toilet, and then has the worst, the most horrific child porn that this guy has ever seen in his 33 years. What a fucking creep. Fuck this guy. I hope this guy's never paroled. He's a dangerous, scary stalker who never even gave a motive for why he did what he did. Still, to this day, he hasn't given a motive. He says that he never sexually assaulted her, touched her, anything before or after killing her, and I've seen nothing online that contradicts his statement. So if we're taking that off the table as a motive, what was it? Like, there's nothing there, which makes it even scarier. I did see one theory online, and it was that because he was a stalker, his stalking and his obsession had gotten to such a point that he could not deal mentally with the idea of losing her in any capacity. And because she was going to be moving literally the day after he killed her, he just couldn't handle the fact that she was going to leave and that he would just be like a footnote, somebody that maybe she remembered, maybe not, when she was his whole entire world. So in order to stop that sort of change, he killed her to sort of solidify himself in her life after she was dead. But that's just a theory, and he's not talking, so we don't know. Anyways. After her murder, since Lauren loved softball and played both in high school and in college, an annual softball tournament was set up to celebrate Lauren's life, which was called, wait for it, the Butterbean Co-ed Softball Tournament. So fucking cute. And this was set to raise funds for the Lauren T. Giddings Memorial Fund, which is a scholarship providing tuition support to students with strong academic credentials or a demonstrated need, especially those who are the first in their immediate family to attend college and those who are interested in pursuing careers in the legal profession or special education. The leader of the committee who organizes the tournament said of the tournament, and I quote, "Everybody knows everybody, and when something like this happens, it's just such a tragic situation that everyone just bands together and will do whatever." Now, I'm really sorry to bring this news to you guys, because I know some of you will care about this and will be affected by this. In 2017, Butterbean passed away too. I'm sorry to bring the mood down so hard, but I'm going to bring it up right back up with some good news. And that is that Lauren's sister, Caitlin, had a baby girl, had a baby daughter after Lauren died, and they named the baby girl Lauren in Lauren's memory. And that her and her family also continue on doing this thing that Lauren used to do, which was called Pink Wednesdays. And essentially on these days, what Lauren would do is eat cake and wear the color pink, and her family continues to do that in her honor. And truly, truly, that's the way we should be living our lives. But anyways, guys, that completes this video. I hope you found it interesting and informative, and it gave you all the information you would want when looking into this case. And of course, I want to thank you for hanging out and remembering Lauren with me today. What happened to her is so horrifying and sad and tragic. She literally had everything going for her. She finished law school. She was going to take the state bar exam and become a lawyer. She had a serious boyfriend who she was moving in with who wanted to marry her. She had all this stuff happening at the prime of her life, and it was snuffed away and stolen away from her, and she was stolen away from all the people who loved her because this selfish, lonely, loser dickbag became obsessed with her and couldn't deal with the fact that she just wasn't that into him. and he killed her for it. And that's so fucked up. Anyways, guys, please let me know down below of any cases you would like to see me cover, because as you know, I have a long list of cases, but every time you leave a suggestion, I put it on my list to look into with your name next to it to give you a shout out. So I want to know what cases that you're into, because I know that you're filled with good ideas and good taste. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. If you haven't already, please don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing the bell, because I put out a new video every week. And I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you specifically, you. And if you want to hang out more consistently, I have all my social media linked down below. Instagram, Twitter, a Facebook page, and a Facebook group. I hang out on there pretty often. I do use social media a bit. And I also have listed down below all of the makeup that I'm wearing, the earrings, the nail polish. Sometimes when I'm wearing my merch, you'll see it. Today I'm not wearing it. Today I'm wearing my friend's band's t-shirt, which you should check out, Ursula. I think they're on iTunes, maybe Spotify as well. Not related at all. I just thought it would match nicely with the shirt. And this is my friend Whitney's band. But I will link my merch down below if you are interested, because you wanted merch, so I made some merch. That's it. So with all of that said, I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That is tight. You are tight. Please stay safe and be a better person than you were yesterday. At the very least, say it with me. Be better than Stephen McDaniel, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.